Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Welcome to our monthly podcast of E2 Effective Elders. And in this year, 2025, we're looking at a specific skill of elders each month. And this month of May 2025, we're looking at strategic thinking, strategic leadership. And I cannot think of two more gifted, knowledgeable, experienced people to welcome into the conversation than my dear brothers and friends, Doctors Curtis McGinnis and Dr. Jim Estep. Brothers, welcome to our podcast. And why don't you help our listeners and those who are watching get acquainted with you? Tell us a little bit about your ministries. Jim, why don't you go first, please?
I'm in Dallas, Texas. I'm the director of the Doctor of Educational Ministries program at Dallas Theological Seminary, and I've been doing that for now a year. I'm also a professor in the Educational Ministries and Leadership area. So thoroughly enjoying our time in Texas.
And Jim goes way back to June of 2008 when he and I and Dr. David Roadcup were in Austria teaching at Haus Edelweiss for TCM, and the Holy Spirit ignited in our thinking this ministry called E2. So Jim is one of the co-founders of E2 Ministries. So great.
I was there when it was just an idea.
Yes, that's an idea. And Curtis, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, I have the privilege to serve as executive director of Crossroads Church Partners. We're a continuation of what was the ministry of Crossroads College, serving churches primarily here in the upper Midwest of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and some of the surrounding regions as well.
Yep. And Curtis, our paths crossed a few years ago, and their board of directors and Curtis invited E2 into a partnership with them. And Curtis has been instrumental in taking E2's teaching and practices into the churches in their constituency. And he is doing an exceptional job of helping churches develop healthy elder teams throughout a major region of our country. So, all right, brothers, how grateful I am. Let's just talk about what is strategic thinking or strategic planning so that people might be aware of just what's at the heart of this.
Well, it's really forward thinking. It's not focusing on the past or merely managing the present. It's looking forward with a preferred future and saying there's a destination. Strategic planning has to be driven by our vision and mission. It gives us a destination, and like a GPS, it says, okay, if we're starting here and that's where the Lord is calling us, what's the path forward?
Great.
What has to happen over the next 2 to 3 years to move us from A to B?
That's excellent. That's a good statement. When you were describing that, what strategic thinking is, the Lord brought to my mind Philippians chapter 3, verse 13, when Paul said, "This one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on." So leaders, how we think determines how we lead. If we're thinking forward, we're going to be leading the church forward. Very, very important. Curtis, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of an imagery that we often share when we're talking with churches about strategic thinking and strategic planning, and that is the coat of arms. Hopefully, I'm not giving it away here, Gary, but we use the imagery of the Australian coat of arms, and on there they have a kangaroo and an emu, and they were very strategic in their thinking of why they put those two animals on their coat of arms, because both of those animals cannot move backwards; they can only move forward. And the same is in the church, as we remember the past and we honor the past, we live in the present, but we need to be moving into the future that God has called us to move into.
Awesome. Now, both of you are very connected to the local church. What is your thinking? Is this a typical skill that is manifested among leaders of churches? Are they thinking forward, strategically putting a roadmap into place to move the church forward. What is your assessment of that?
Typically, I would say this, typically, churches are not doing this. Many of them are very much bound to the past, and many of them simply manage the present. Leaders, and Gary, I think this is what you were saying, leaders are ones who look forward. Managers take care of what's here. And I fear that in a lot of our churches, we have a lot of managers, very capable managers, but not necessarily leaders that are thinking strategically.
That's good. What have you witnessed, Curtis?
I would say most churches, they understand what they do, and they've had a long history of doing these things, but they haven't stepped back, and most leaders don't even, in the churches that I experience, don't even step back to say, why exactly are we doing what we are doing? We know we have all this activity and we have all these programs, and that's the managing of the day-to-day, as Jim was saying, but there isn't enough, or often enough, stepping back to say, why are we doing what we are doing? And to really think about, okay, where is it that God is calling us to go? And in light of what God is calling us to go, or where he's calling us to go, what is it that we need to do in response to that?
Now, and you bring up a great point. Where is it that God is calling us? It sounds like strategic thinking and strategic leadership might be an exercise of faith, that there's a spiritual element to this.
Absolutely. I'm just reminded of Hebrews chapter 1. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen.
Yeah.
It
Hebrews
is
11, verse 1.
Yes.
11, verse 1. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of that passage going, exercising your faith connects to strategic planning, and strategic planning becomes very much a manifestation of the faith of the church. Where is God calling us? What does he want us to do in the future? Where is he heading? And how do we? I'm also reminded of Genesis with the call of Abraham when we translate it, God looking at Abraham and going, "Go to Canaan." The actual Hebrew word there is "come." Come to Canaan. God is already there. Abraham, come to me. Well, once again, it's a faith statement. Our strategic plan is really saying, where is God? We are going to follow his leadership, and this is how he wants us to go, in the direction to go where he calls us to be. And once again, it isn't a reality. It's a preferred future. It's a preferred future. So it really is a faith statement to step out from the present and say, the Lord is leading us in this direction.
That's very powerful. So as leaders, we would want to deepen our walk with God by growing in our faith anchored in God, that he's calling us to a preferred future. And it's our responsibility that we have this leadership skill. This is a skill of leaders, particularly elders. When you make mention of that, Jim, when we look in the scripture, we have been made in God's image. You mentioned Genesis chapter 12. In the creation account, chapter 1, we have been made in God's image, and God is always strategic. Even in the 6 days of creation, we look at what was done sequentially, and a part of that sequential creation of the universe shows organizational strategy. When we think of Noah building the ark, he had to ask the question, what's next? Where do I cut the trees? How do I plane the wood? How do I assemble the ark? Joseph, how many acres can I plant? Where do I store all this grain for 7 years that the Lord provides? How do I distribute it? What's next? What's next? Nehemiah, the building of the wall. This section had to be rebuilt next to this person who was going to rebuild this section. So this whole thinking is really an essential way of leaders. We must think forward, asking what's next to lead the church forward. Curtis, do you think that this would bring any kind of benefit to the local church? How could this be of benefit to a congregation?
Oh, absolutely. As I've worked with churches, and as both you guys have worked with churches, you see that when churches get this, it's so powerful to them in helping them to move forward. I think of it in 3 or 4 different things that in ways that it actually helps the local churches. Is first, it brings clarity. It brings clarity on knowing where they are going. Again, so often churches are just doing the activity, but not really moving forward. And so this brings clarity. Oftentimes I'll use the illustration of, when working with a church, and if I would say, let's go to the airport, the first question is, what airport? You have to know where you're going, so you have to have clarity around that. Jim, in the Dallas area, you could probably pick 2 or 3 different airports,
Absolutely.
and that's the thing with churches. If you're not very clear on where you're going, each person is going to decide for themselves what direction they want to move in. So it brings clarity, and secondly, it brings alignment. And we all know what happens if on our vehicles, if we have a tire that's out of alignment, it's not going to wear correctly. And in ministry, we just all need to be aligned, moving in the right direction. And so even if we pick the right airport, there's probably multiple different routes you can get there. We need to be aligned on getting to that place all the same way, moving in the same direction. And then third, I would say, is you get intentionality out of it. Is that this direction isn't just for the senior minister or even just for the elders. It's for the ministry team leaders. It's for the key volunteers, that everybody intentionally needs to be moving in that same direction. It's not just enough for one person to know, all have to know. And then ultimately, as the elders of the local church, they have to provide that accountability and oversight to make sure that you're actually moving in that direction. And for me, when those 4 things come together, there is a clear strategy that has been articulated and developed, and that the church is moving in that direction. It's just really powerful to see what happens when everybody in the church is moving in the same direction to which God is, I love what Jim said, as God is calling them to come.
Right. And when you identify those 4 benefits for the local church, if they would do this work of leading with a strategy, developing a strategic plan, if they would do this work, those 4 benefits are going to bring health, and healthy things grow. It's going to bring growth to the church. Those 4 very key benefits, as you were describing those, I thought of the word simplicity. It's going to make church all the more simple.
Yes.
And simplicity creates momentum. It's complexity that kills momentum. So we've got a bunch of people doing a whole whip stitch of a thing. Everybody's doing his or her own thing in the church. It's kind of like hunting deer with a shotgun with pellets. And that shot, those pellets go all over the place. But if we put a slug in that shotgun, we're going to simplify things and hopefully get that deer. And we want the church headed in that one direction, and that will simplify church. And simplicity creates momentum, and momentum is going to move the church forward, and it's going to produce a kingdom result for the glory of Jesus. Absolutely. Any ways that you would practically suggest, if a church is not doing this, what would the 2 of you think could start the process or the initiative?
Well, if I can quote a line that's attributed to Albert Einstein, the same level of thinking that got you into the problem cannot get you out of it.
That's good.
So you need an infusion, if you will, of new perspective, new information. You can't just keep thinking the old way and expect for it suddenly to have new results. So my first reaction is you're going to have to call in, quote unquote, somebody from the outside, whether that's a consultant or somebody who can do some level of assessment. but someone who can come in and basically start the process of thinking forward and leading you in a pattern of how to do that. Because if you've never done it before, it's not something you can just do naturally.
Right. And that's a great segue. Obviously, that's something that we do through E2.
Absolutely.
We've got a tool in our tool belt, developing a 3-year strategic plan. And the method that we use is user-friendly.
Oh, yes.
It's very easy that once a church does this, and we don't produce your 3-year plan, we facilitate the process. And you take copious notes, learning, and then when you complete your first 3-year plan, you, the leadership team, you process your second one, and then your third one, and so on. We have a partner church in Delaware, just minutes from the Atlantic Ocean, and they are now on their 5th 3-year plan. I went there years and years ago, and meeting with their leadership team, did their first 3-year plan, and they not only accomplished that first 3-year plan, but then they created a culture where they're always asking and thinking, what's next? And I'm very happy to say that lead pastor, minister, he has taught many churches and parachurch organizations on the Eastern Seaboard how to think this way and how to lead this way. So, and I know, Curtis, you're doing that in the Upper Midwest. This is something that you do on behalf of E2, helping churches to do this. And many churches across the Midwest here, as well as in other parts of our country, have developed a 3-year plan. And here's the key, just as Jim said, an infusion of a new perspective, an infusion of a new way of thinking. Some churches get it, and some don't.
Can I just share an example?
Yeah.
I've just been talking with a church recently, and in talking about church health, after meeting with them for several hours, they looked at me and said, Jim, I'm not sure we've ever seen a healthy church. So my whole point is they needed an infusion of what does that even look like?
Right.
Because their level of thinking, they didn't have a point of reference. And so they needed to see a different way of doing church, if you will.
Right.
And draw from it.
Yep.
I would just add, and Jim brought up this point earlier, but this has to come out of a church that knows its vision and mission and values, first off. And then on the backside of a church that is doing this, like you said, it does create that momentum, Gary. And it makes me think of Ephesians 4:11-13, where the people are equipped and there is unity in the church. And so that's a byproduct of this as well, is not just that you have a strategy, not just that people are moving in the same direction, but it's that you have equipped the people to do the work of the ministry, and that there is unity amongst the church. Why? Because you're all moving in that same direction, which God is calling you to do.
Yep, creates that forward momentum. Absolutely. And that same chapter, verse 16, from Christ, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So thinking this way can incorporate every believer to bring his or her gift. 1 Peter 4, verse 10, each one should use whatever gift they've received to serve others. So it would create a culture of health, and healthy things grow. And Jim, just as you said, there are regretfully today churches that have never seen a healthy church. And that's, again, something that we at E2, we would love to help you with. We are,
Absolutely.
Curtis is another person certified in NCD, Natural Church Development. Jim is completely familiar with that from his work at Lincoln Christian Seminary years ago. Lincoln, throughout the Midwest, kept promoting NCD, Natural Church Development, and it's a legitimate assessment of church health in the local congregation, and we'd be happy to help you with that. All right, gentlemen, that wraps up today, and we're stirring the thinking of elders or church leaders about asking the question and answering what's next. E2, we even have a book called What's Next? How Thinking Forward Moves the Church Forward. And if you'd like, those who have listened to the podcast or watched it, if you go to our website, e2elders.org, and click on shop, you can get this book, buy one, get one. So we're going to ship you a free copy if you buy a copy. But on the coupon code, just type May Podcast, all one word, May Podcast, and you'll get a free copy of What's Next. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. We're so grateful that both of you are essential parts of the leadership team of E2. We could not do what we do without the two of you. So we're grateful. And if people have questions of either of you, may they email you? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right, great. And we will make sure that your emails are showing on the screen as well, and how grateful we are. Brothers, thank you very, very much.